Okay, boys and girls, we are going to read our book called Underground, written and illustrated by Denise Fleming. She wrote the words and drew the pictures. Take a look at the word underground. What do you notice about the first letter? That's right, that's our letter U. U for under, underground. And if you take a look at the cover, you can see there's a little boy in the picture, and he's outside, and he's laying down on the ground, and he sees some creatures here. What are these different creatures that are crawling around? He's even got one on his finger. Right? Is that an ant? Yes, those are ants. And you can see on the cover of the book that there is a tunnel. Right? The ants are going through the tunnel underneath the ground. Let's find out more about the creatures that live under the ground. Low down. Way down. Underground. And there's a bird. And what does the bird have in her beak? What is this creature? Yes, you're right. It's a worm. And it looks like the bird is having a tug of war with the worm. Part of the worm is still under the ground, and part of the worm is above the ground. Above and below, or over and under, right? The worm lives under the ground, doesn't it? You can see some more things that are underground. What are these vegetables that grow under the ground? That's right, those are carrots. The part that we eat, right, the orange part of the carrot grows under the ground. And the leaves and stem of the carrots are above the ground, aren't they? And did you see some creatures over here? Little babies just being born under the ground. What are those? Some baby mice? Let's keep reading. Creatures dig. Take a look. Here's a big tunnel under the ground, and this creature is called a mole. Boys and girls, do you remember another book that we read that had a mole in it? That's right. Do you remember when we read The Mitten by Jan Brett, and we acted out the story of all the animals that crawled into the mitten? There was a mole in that story, wasn't there? And here's the mole. It lives under the ground. Look at those claws. No wonder why the mole lives under the ground. It can really use those claws to dig in the dirt and make those tunnels. And here's a rabbit over here. A rabbit makes holes or burrows in the ground to have their babies in the ground. And some creatures like to run around under the ground. You can see this is the cover of the book, wasn't it? Where we saw the ants. And the ants make all of these tunnels under the ground in the dirt. And the ants really help the soil, don't they? Past highways and byways. Here's some more creatures that live under the ground. Here we have some chipmunks. And the chipmunks are going right down into their tunnels under the ground. And take a look. Look at this chipmunk down here under the ground. It has some acorns, right? They are going to stockpile those acorns and have them to eat, right? And here is a woodchuck. And a woodchuck is another name for a groundhog. Remember when we talked about groundhogs during Groundhog Day? Remember we made those groundhogs in our paper cups? Right? They live under the ground too, boys and girls. So we have chipmunks and groundhogs that live under the ground too. Squirmways and wormways. We know worms live under the ground. And it looks like this mouse is ready to go under the ground. And some lizards can live under the ground. And here we have a toad. That's a toad that lives under the ground. Digging furrows and burrows. Here's that mole again, really using those sharp claws to dig furrows under the ground. And here we have a box turtle. And the box turtle is laying her eggs under the ground. That protects the eggs until they're ready to hatch. Round roots and bones. In this picture, you can see the roots of the plants. Right here are the plants growing above the ground. You can see the stems. But underneath or underground, below the ground, you can see the roots of the plants. Right? They stretch out like fingers in the ground, and the roots of the plants hold the plants in place. And we might have seen this if you have a dog at home. Does your dog like to dig underground and put bones in the dirt under the ground? I think dogs like to do that, don't they? What else do we find under the ground? Rocks and stones. There's some big rocks and some little rocks under the ground. That's right, and you can see this little chipmunk. This little chipmunk is running through its tunnel, isn't it? It's running through the tunnel as this little boy is putting a new plant in the ground. You can see the soil and the stem and the leaves of this plant, and he's going to put it right into the hole that he dug into the ground. And here this chipmunk is running by, right through its tunnel. Funneling and tunneling. Here's some more creatures that live under the ground. These are yellow jackets. They look like bees, don't they? That's right. Yellow jackets build their nests under the ground. Look at this. It's a big circle, isn't it? This is the yellow jacket's nest. They put that nest under the ground. And here are some baby rabbits under the ground. Right? That's where they're born. Creatures work their way through sand and clay. Now you can see the feet of the little boy and maybe his mom or dad, and they're above the ground, right? And what do they have here? What is this where the water is coming through? Yes, that's the hose. And they just planted all of their new plants, maybe some flowers or vegetables, and now they're using the hose to water their new plants. And the water is going down under the ground, right? And we see some creatures over here. We see some worms, right, under the ground in their tunnels. And what's this over here? That's a little spider there. It's called a trapdoor spider. And some spiders make their homes under the ground, just like this one. Very good. Low down. What is this animal? There's plenty by my house. Is this a squirrel? Yes. And what's the squirrel doing? The squirrel is digging under the ground, right? And you know what squirrels like to do? They like to bury their food in the ground and come back for it later, right? They dig, dig, dig way down into the ground, and they come back and get that food later. It was fun to read the story called Underground. Look at all the different creatures that live under the ground. What a great story. Some chipmunks, some worms, and let's not forget this mole. Look at those sharp claws. What a great story, boys and girls. We're going to talk more about creatures that live under the ground. I'll see you soon.